working on the friggin' homemade junk buggy, the DIY UTV. Hi, buddy. And it's time to get this friggin' motor going. Now, it's been sitting for about 1 or 2 years, and this chain is kind of rusty, and yeah, what about the rest of it? Yeah, there's like a pre-filter, and I'll turn on my light. Hello? Hello? Oh my goodness. That's terrible. Wow, I can see in there pretty good with the flash. That's a filter, a fuel filter, down there in the bottom. But the inside of this tank is pretty bad. I thought it was rusty, but I think it's more like gummed up varnish, dried out fuel. I thought it was rust. I think there is some rust, but it smells like that cheap ethanol gas, that low grade gasoline. So hopefully the carburetor's not gummed up. I might put some sea foam in it and just put an extra fuel filter on it. Or what I should do, what I really should do is unbolt the tank here and here and here, take the tank right off and clean it and flush it. Maybe put some lead pellets in there and shake them around and break some of that stuff up. I don't know. See if I can clean that tank out, or out of that, or I'm gonna need a couple fuel filters because that's not good. Hey, Buster. How you doing? Oh yeah, friggin' right. Alright, I took out bolts, one here and one on the other side of the back of the motor, and one here and another one on the back side. So 2 bolts and 2 nuts. And now the tank is loose, but you'll see that the fuel line, this is the fuel line here, and it goes under the, this is the governor, and eventually I'll be disconnecting it or bypassing it, and it's basically a mechanical centrifugal rev limiter, so it limits your RPMs so you don't blow the thing up. But I'm going to be disconnecting it or bypassing it eventually, not right now. So for now, I need to disconnect this fuel line either at the carb or at the tank, and there's a vacuum vent tube here, and you have to disconnect it also. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect these 2 lines. The tank is empty, so I don't have to worry about any fuel coming out of the line. Okay, so I just got the fuel line undone and bone dry. I already knew that, but the filter in the tank, I don't know, there seems to be stuff in the line here. So that means there's dirt on this side of the filter. There shouldn't be any dirt, or there shouldn't be anything on this side of the filter. So there might be shit in the line too. I don't know. Yeah, there's shit in that line. So I'm gonna have to change the line, probably clean the carb, drop the bowl in the carb. Oh, frig. There's supposed to be a filter in here, but maybe it's just from sitting around from the fuel drying up. So I'm gonna have to clean that out too, I guess. Okay, so that rubber's damaged there, but take the vent tube off, take the bolts off, take the line off underneath. I just want to talk about what the motor looks like right now with the gas tank and the breather and the exhaust and all this on top. It's weird how they put the fuel beside the heat exhaust, but anyway, yeah, that's what it looks like right now. But I think when you take the fuel tank off, it looks like that. I'm just going to set this fuel tank down here somewhere. And that's the governor there that I was telling you about, the throttle, or the rev limiter. And it goes down internally with the centrifugal mechanism inside the engine there. And it hooks up to the carburetor here and a spring off this throttle, here. So I've done some previous disassembly here, and I've taken the wing nuts off here. So the breather comes off, or the top of the breather comes off like that. And I'll just set that down there. And then another wing nut comes off here. And then this breather filter assembly comes off. And then it looks like this. Excuse me. And there's a bolt here and two nuts here, and there's a vent tube here that goes from the breather to the valve cover. And I noticed that you can't see it, but this tube is cracked. It's damaged. And then this comes off. Excuse me. This is only this is like a 90-degree adapter where the breather comes out the top. And then the engine looks like this. So there's your carburetor right there, and it breathes out the front. This is your choke lever, and it opens and closes that choke flapper. This is your fuel shutoff. This is your fuel line. And the only thing left on top is the muffler. And I've already taken the nuts off. There's two nuts down below. Don't lose the hardware or the nuts. And it comes off of some studs. There's a gasket on there. Gasket's not too bad. I'm gonna set that down there. And now the engine looks like this. It's much more low profile now. And so I think the engine looks like 100 times better like this. Looks a little more like a dirt bike engine or ATV engine with a separate fuel tank and separate exhaust. So I'm not really sure. I might be able to relocate a different fuel tank or a bigger fuel tank. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. Might put a breather straight out here. Or, yeah, I can always relocate a lot of that stuff, like the breather and the exhaust and the fuel tank. For a stationary engine, they're mounted on there, but for a buggy or a dirt bike or vehicle or ATV, you can pretty much mount them anywhere. So I'm probably going to remove the governor. I'm not sure about this plate here. The only thing that plate holds is this throttle, which I won't be using. And there's one bolt right there for the breather, but there's also 2 bolts here, which is probably sufficient. So I might be able to take that whole top plate right off and let it cool better, because the aluminum head and the cooling fins are under here. Can you see the crap inside of there? That's the fuel line, and that's dried out fuel. Probably ethanol, like the cheap stuff that's got ethanol in it, the low grade fuel. Ethanol plays havoc on stuff like this. So the engine was left unused, and the fuel tank was left bone dry. And if there's crud in the line here from dry fuel, and the tank has crud in it, and there's a filter built into the tank, and I can only imagine that filter would be getting gummed up. And I've got the carburetor, I got the breather off, so the carburetor should slide right off now, aside from this throttle linkage, which comes undone easily. When you open the throttle and slide it off, it just pops up out. So if you slide this out a little bit and then open the throttle, it'll line up with that slot, and then you can take that off. I just dropped this little gasket here. Anywho, I'm probably going to end up taking the carburetor right off. And this line, I'm probably going to have to change it completely, because it's cheap rubber and it's full of crud. And this is the deteriorated rubber line that comes from the valve to the valve cover to the breather. It's got a crack in the top, and it's all deteriorated here. Actually, it's like falling off pretty much in my fingers. So I'm going to have to replace that line, clean the carb. I'm going to take the nut off the bottom of the carb here and drop the bowl and check if it's clean. Check the float and the needle. There might be crud in there, so I might run a little bit of seafoam through it, or fuel, some type of fuel treatment, and see if I can get this cleaned out and running. I think she'll clean up nice. Okay, so there's like one bolt in the bottom, very bottom of the bowl here, the carburetor, 10 mil, and I took it out, and it's just full of powdery, I guess it's dried out fuel. Probably, like I said, probably the ethanol stuff. That's why small engines, you're not supposed to use any more than 10% ethanol. That's what it says right on the fuel cap of the fuel tank. So I took this here and I banged it out, and all that crud came out of there pretty bad. So I'm gonna have to soak this and clean it. And the carb has a float here, and there's a needle valve that goes up and down. And I can see that the needle valve, there's a brass needle right in here, and it's stuck. So I'm gonna have to soak that and make sure it's working. There might be crud. This is the on-off switch to shut the fuel off and on. There might be crud in there, so I might soak it in seafoam, the carburetor, and clean up the lines and stuff. This plate on top here, I think I mentioned it already. It's covering the cooling fins on the head, the aluminum head, and it holds this throttle, which I won't be using, this manual handheld throttle, and it's really stiff, really stiff. And there's a cable holder here, so you can run a cable to that, but that would be really stiff too. Like, you push the gas pedal and it would stick. So I'm either going to modify that to run a cable to it, or take this thing right off completely and run a cable to the carb butterfly, or run a cable to here somehow. I'm not sure. And if I keep it on there, there's a cable holder here too, I guess, so you can run a cable here. If I keep it on there, I'll drill some speed holes. drill some holes in it so it can breathe, so the aluminum head can breathe better. But otherwise, I'm going to take it off completely. There's one bolt there, one bolt there, and there's one back here. And I'm going to soak the carb in the meantime. Here's the carburetor here, and the float pin. There's a pin somewhere here. Oh, see those holes? There's a pin goes through those holes and holds the float and needle in that passageway. So the pin fell out when I had it on its side. The pin fell out. The pin's in there. The float, needle, everything's in there soaking. That's 50% gasoline, 40% seafoam, and 10% guaranteed to pass fuel conditioner. So it's just mostly gas and seafoam, and you can see why they call it a float, because it floats. And the carburetor, the bowl that was all cruddy, I put it in there to soak also. I had the carburetor soaking in there. The gasket seems to be stuck on there pretty good, so I just left the gasket on there. Had it soaking, and there was some crud that came out of the on-off switch here. That's where the fuel comes into the carb. So I turned the fuel on. You can open that switch up with 2 screws, but I might not. This is their throttle lever here. Brap, 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 brap. Yeah. And everything's pretty good. In the center here, that is your jet. That's where your fuel comes out of your carb, and vacuum sucks it into your intake. So you want to make sure, I'm sorry I'm so shaky, you want to make sure that jet is clean. And I might blow some compressed air through there just to make sure that there's no crud in there. And I might put another fuel filter on it when I'm done. So I'm just going to let this stuff soak and clean it up. I'm going to change this line because this line is that cheap. One difference between these Hondas and the Honda Copy, this is a Honda Copy like a Predator or Power Fist. It's identical to a 9-horse Honda motor, but one big difference between these remanufactured, these off-brand ones, is they use cheap components, like these lines. I found a crack, yeah, there's, sorry about the focus, but there's weather cracks in that line, and there's a big crack somewhere in that line, and it's full of dry fuel anyway. So I'm just gonna change the whole line out. Same with this one here. It's just completely deteriorated, and the engine's only like 3 or 4 years old maybe, and it's only been run for maybe 2 hours. It spent most of its life sitting around in the barn. So anyway, that's where I'm at right now. I'm gonna have to change those. Oh my goodness, what's really going on? The friggin' engine. There's a kill switch there. I'll probably mount that on the dash. There's the intake port there. It's pretty clean. There was a little tiny bit of carbon in there and stuff. Oh man, am I ever so shaky. Sorry about that. You got parts soaking in here. I think most of that color, most of that yellow color is from the carburetor bowl. The steel bowl from the bottom of the carburetor. It was pretty caked. I couldn't get any fuel to come through this line here, and it is, probably can't see that. There's some really dirty stuff So I took that on-off switch. There's 2 screws in the on-off switch. I took the 2 screws out, and I'm trying to get fuel. This is dirty. This is all dried up gunk in here, dried up fuel. So I need to clean that passageway out. Look at that booger. I just picked a booger. Anyway, I had to clean that out and get the fuel going through there. Terrible, terrible neglect. Improper storage. You never store an engine with low-grade empty fuel. Terrible. So I got this engine and clutch separately. Ugh. Anyway, I shoved it on there. It's kind of stuck on the shaft now. But I got these from my stepfather, and they were welded together, the clutch and this hub here. And he had something driven straight. So I'm going to be driving it off the V-belt here, so I won't be needing this. But you can tell that the outside spins when the inside of the shaft does not, and vice versa. So the engine can be running or idling, and this can be standing still. But I did some grinding because this was welded on there, so I grinded the welds off, and I smoothened it out a little bit here. It seems to me that the only thing that holds that clutch on is the key shaft, or the keyway in the shaft, and there's some freaking good compression there. Anyway, there's one tiny little set screw. Wow. I'll turn it over here. Okay, this is going to be a pain in the ass. Must be on compression stroke. That little tiny set screw right there, I think that's the only thing that holds it on. So anyway, I was trying to clean out that passageway in the carburetor, and it was really gummed up. So I'm just going to let it soak. I let it soak for a few hours, but I guess maybe that's not enough. I tried to take a wire and poke through that fuel passageway that's clogged up, but it must be clogged up. It must be clogged up pretty damn good. Pretty darn good. So I'm just going to let it soak. This clutch is almost ready to go, and then I can start aligning pulleys and belts and whatever to drive my transmission. Let me tell you what, boys, she was a pain in the ass. But you see this wire here? I got this wire. I had to poke it down in there, soak it overnight in fuel, gas and seafoam, because this is the inlet where the fuel goes into the carburetor. And there's an on-off switch here, or there's an open-close valve here. And she was clogged up big time, terrible, in this tube here. But if you see that hole right there closest to the bottom of the screen, you can see the end of the wire. So if I push and pull on this wire here, you should be able to watch it. You should be able to see it. So I finally got that wire poked through. I poked on it. I soaked it in fuel and seafoam. Man, I spent probably over an hour, just trying to, between yesterday and today, trying to get that to. I tried blowing compressed air through there. It wouldn't blow through. Nothing. So now that I got the wire poked through, I should be able to blow air through it and clean it out a little better. And now the fuel should flow into the carburetor. The rest of the carburetor is not that bad. There's a jet in the bottom there. It needs to be clean. The one in the middle it needs to be cleaned, so it looks not bad. Hard to see here. Everything else looks pretty good. So I'm going to take that wire out and probably blow some compressed air through there. Well, now that I got the fuel passage cleaned out, I had to take that fuel switch apart, which I didn't want to do, but it was necessary. So I got the fuel passage cleaned out now and working, both of them. There's one that goes from the inlet to the switch, and there's another one that goes from the switch to the jet. Or no, from the switch to the bowl. Yeah. So anyway, the bowl was full of crap, I think I showed you earlier. And I just took a little tiny wire brush. Oops. I just took a little tiny wire brush and by hand, and I just cleaned it out by hand. Ugh. And then I drop it on the ground like a moron. Anyway, it looks good on the outside. There's a couple of rust pits and spots starting on the inside, but there's not too much I can do about that. And as long as I keep fuel in it, it should be fine. Carburetor's in good shape aside from that fuel passage that was clogged. But I got that fixed, so now I can start putting the carb back together. Maybe hear that fucking piece of shit. Maybe hear it run. This is the tub of gasoline and seafoam that I soaked the carburetor in. And look at all the shit in there. That's just all that shit is from the carburetor and the float bowl, or the bowl off the bottom of the carb, and the wire brush that I used to clean the carb. All that is out of the carburetor. All that shit. I still need to get, there's a pin in there and there's a rubber O-ring in there I need to get out of there. You can't even see. It's only a couple inches deep, but it's so dirty and murky that you can't even see. There's a rubber O-ring in there, and there's a pin that holds the float, and you can't even see them because the fuel is so dirty, or the bath is so dirty. Murky. There she is. The last two carburetor parts, and they're, wow, she's dirty. I tried to fish that pin out with a magnet, but I think it's stainless or something, because the magnet wouldn't pull it out, or a magnetic screwdriver. So now I better put the friggin' carb back together, but it's lunch times. I really appreciate the fact that the needle and float stayed together here. I don't know if I can put a carb together with one hand or not while I'm holding the camera, but you'll see the needle goes into that brass seat there when you put her back together. And this pin here, I guess the only thing that holds the pin in is the bowl. And the pin goes like a hinge here. Oh. You know what sucks? Having no cameraman. I need a friggin' cameraman. And a better camera. Anyway, that pin goes through there just like a hinge. Which I can't do with one hand, apparently. And then the bowl goes back on. And here's the bowl here, it goes back on with one bolt. And that's it. Better not forget that, because she won't seal up too good. She won't seal up too good without that, boys. Alright. Started putting her back together. Back together again. I just want to fire it up because I've never, I haven't had it running. The engine's been sitting for 2 years. 1 or 2 years, I'm not sure. The motor's only 2 or 3 years old, maybe. And it's just been sitting around and improper storage. So I put the exhaust back on because that's all I have right now, and it'd be loud as fuck and it'd be spitting flames if I don't put a muffler on it or exhaust on it. So put the factory one back on for now. Put the factory breather back on, but I kind of deleted the cage. There's a cage that goes around it. So it's on and it's sealed good here at the base. A little bit more room here. The fuel tank's not on it. I went down to CarQuest and I got this fuel line here, which is awesome. I haven't tried it yet. Maybe I should try it right now. Yep. Yep, that's the right one. Alright, so we got a fuel line here. I might use the factory tank just for a test run, but I know it's really dirty inside. So I knew there were some old filters here, some old fuel filters, and I found this one here. It's still in the package. It's clear. The tube is clear. So if there's any chunks of anything in the line, I'll see it. And if the filter gets clogged, I'll see it. And there's a pre-filter in the bottom of the tank too, so I'll have to keep an eye on that. So I'm going to put some fuel in it now that the carb's all cleaned out and see if it'll fire. Frig, boys, I really need a cameraman or a tripod or something. I guess I do have a little tripod for my... Yeah, I do have a little tripod I should be using. Anyway, I turned on the fuel, and as soon as I turned the fuel on, I seen it start running, and you can see it in there. So the carb's probably full of fuel now, which is good. I noticed that the fuel is labeled on to the right, and that is accurate, and the choke is labeled on to the right, and that is not accurate because the choke comes on when you slide it to the left. So I don't know, that sticker is wrong. But anyway, this thing hasn't run in about 2 years. So I think she's ready to fire. How am I gonna hold it down? How am I gonna do this? I'm gonna have to hold it, and it's got high compression. Make sure that the kill switch is on and all the wires are good. I'll probably step on the exhaust. It's not hot yet. It will be though. Oh, this is not good, boys. Put a little bit of fuel in the tank. The tank's still a little bit crusty inside, but filters should help. Get her on the compression stroke here. I need to hold the motor down somehow. First fucking pull. First fucking pull. No way. Fired up on the first pull. Right on. Well, she might have to warm up before I can turn the choke off. But that's good. She runs. It's kind of quiet too. Well, it's not quiet, but it's not loud. Right on. I like that kind. That's a little better.